So I have a couple of questions for the artists just to get the conversation started, but we want you also to pose questions if you have them. So the first question I have here is, and I'll kind of summarize it first. As curators, we examine the essence of a woman through your artwork, using it to express the feminine force figuratively, conceptually, and metaphorically. In doing so, we have placed many of the works in a new context. In viewing your work through the curator's lens, has it changed your perception of your work? Would anyone like to respond to that? I think you all kind of touched on it. Would anyone like to elaborate on that? If not, we can go on to the next question. Michael? I thought you were saying yes.
No, I was looking to see. I will say one thing. As I said, I think I said it before, was I was very surprised to be included in this, and it turns out that you and I were just discussing. I was talking to you about how interesting it was that you decided to place my piece next to his, and I would like to ask you the question.
Yes.
Why?
Well, again, I saw in the women, in the way that they are posed, a certain personality and energy and statement related to identity. And I really love the way in which the photographs are done. The technique is just really incredible, very clever. But I love them because we don't often see, in this country I think we're a little prudish about nude photography. And I've worked as a curator in different galleries, many of which in Washington, D.C. would not show nude work, painting or sculpture or photography. And so these pieces just really resonated with me because they're so beautifully done. And I juxtaposed your abstract pieces next to the photographs because I thought that there was this narrative, this certain dialogue that was going on between the two in terms of what the woman's body was saying, the way she was positioned, her persona and her energy. And then I felt that the color, the vibrant color, the richness in your work spoke to that. So that's the way, I think that they're speaking to one another, they're playing with one another, and I just love the way that they look together as well.
We love the spot.
Yeah, I mentioned that. I love it too. I mean, when I originally, there's 22 pieces in the Phylicia series, and they were originally intended to all hang together to be sort of this relentless repetition of the figure. And I really like the fact that you can present them in different ways, in different contexts, and in different places, and draw out different meanings. I think comparing them next to Michael's work really brings out the beauty of the pattern that's going on in there, and really celebrates the aesthetic. And I've done 2 books on sculpture, on public sculpture. And public sculpture is entirely dependent on its context of where it is. The piece really cannot be separated from where it is. And when people do try to look at them, there are plenty of pieces, and I'm kind of getting off the subject too much, but the Subaru in Inner Harbor is one that I think is just the worst placed piece of sculpture in Baltimore. And whether or not you like the Subaru, it just shouldn't be there. So where things are matters and changes their meaning and changes the way you interpret them. So having pieces that complement each other and speak back and forth, I think isn't just an accident. It's something that's always happening. Wherever something is, it's speaking to the other things around it. So I think it's great.
I actually have a comment on my work related to that, which is context, because I also was surprised to be included in this show. A lot of times my work, the reason that this series is called Permutations Toward Infinity is that the groupings really escalate as you put pieces together in groups. For example, a group of 9 of my works in context, when you calculate all the ways that it can be turned and rearranged, it's over 95 billion permutations in that one group of 9 pieces. So to me, the fact that my work was scaled down into this exhibition, sort of in an exhibition style to be 4 pieces, when I'm really working to scale it up, was an interesting contextualization of the work being different. So that instead of it being made bigger and out to household size.
And I have to tell you, we've really struggled with narrowing it down because the series is so incredibly beautiful. And so we printed them out and we're patching and pairing and trying to figure out how to just narrow the selection down. These particular ones were included in the show because for me they were symbolic of water, sustaining life, and then the earth. Yes.
Was this wall different than the first time I saw it?
Yes, it was.
I remember being strikingly strong the first time I saw it, and it's not there now. So
Yes, a little, we made a little bit of a change. Okay, so the next question is for our filmmakers. Through film, complex issues of healing, memory, and transformation, a romantic relationship, and the love between a mother and daughter are addressed. In all, everyone is on a journey, seeking resolve. What was your journey, and did you find resolve? And I guess the two of you are filmmakers. So Phylicia, she's standing behind you, so you're first.
I kind of spoke about it, but my journey was to root myself. My journey was to let go, and I feel that I did find resolve because the person in the video that I see is not me anymore. It doesn't even feel like me anymore. So I think now after I filmed it 2 years ago, I edited it and like looked at it for the first time maybe like 6 months ago. So I couldn't even look at it for the longest because I just needed that space from it. And it was a really, the process was really intense for me. So I think that over the last 2 years, I did find resolve, and I feel that I learned how to just dig my heels into the right places in the right circumstances and not the wrong ones.
That's good.
Yeah. David, I'm going to just ask David to respond because he's one of the videographers as well, and your work is a little different, but I wonder if you have any comment about that, though.
Yeah, I found resolution in the piece. It's interesting to be in the show because my work is much more abstract. I really enjoyed listening to the artists because I've asked myself all these questions. I'm not what it is to be a woman, but I have dealt with the feminine energy over the years, and it's gone from representational to metaphysical to spiritual, and now my work is boiled down just to pure energy. I like the Buddhist idea. When I ask my students at school in the semester, I just wait to ask this one, who are you? And you know, there's complex answers to that. The simple answer is, I'm me. And we're made up of so many different, like, if I'm speaking myself, so many non-David entities have formed who I am, but if I start taking all of those away and just look at who I am intrinsically, it becomes a different question. I think the video kind of does that in a way, because a 10-year-old critiqued my work in Dallas in a gallery I showed them down there, and she says, at first I was intrigued, and then I was nauseous. And I said, you got it. The gallerist said, you know, it's impossible to understand this work. You just kind of have to give it up and follow it. And I think that's much like a woman now.
Yes. You can own that, I think.
I did that video, I guess, a couple of years ago, 2009, so it's a little distant in some ways. Certainly my daughter's back home. We try to work on our relationship, more or less. But I often think video possibly is maybe one of the most difficult mediums because you are trying to convey the visual, in my instance, a kind of story, And yet, I don't think it's ever resolved. I'll put it that way. I don't think the process for me is ever resolved. And I also think that we only think in 3-minute bites. So that's my concern.
All right, I'll go on to the next question unless someone has. Right? Many of you have appropriated images or materials which reference a woman's ubiquitous presence in nature. In what way do you believe your work conveys the feminine force as it relates to nature? Okay, this question was for Rachel and Mary.
So I don't really think about woman or man or anything, but when I look back at my work, it's a woman's work. And about 10 years ago, a friend was walking through the house and showing the work to someone she had brought over. And, I'm explaining, my husband's also an artist, I'm explaining, this is mine, this is Joelle's, this is mine. And she looks at me and she says, Rachel, I know which is your work. It's got vaginas, it's got curves, it's got this. And I just looked at her and I said, what? And then I looked around and I thought, well, that's right. It's, very clear which work is mine and which work is my husband's. So in this world in which it's not about female or male, but feminine and masculine, I discover the feminine in myself through my work to some extent. I have children and I've done all of that, but I think of myself kind of tough. But then I see the way my work comes out, and it's kind of the softest part of me. And it's interesting to me to see what comes out and the forms that I'm drawn to. And so that's part of what's so exciting for me about making artwork, is I discover more about myself.
I really relate to a lot of the things that she just said. It's very interesting to look back on your own life. I grew up in a very female household. There was my father and my mother and 4 daughters. So there was a lot of femininity and a lot of, and probably not as much of knowing males in that way, of living with them before I was married. But it really isn't something I think a lot about in my work. However, it may be that people would look at it and see that. I mean, to just have this one small piece is hard for anyone here to actually have a view into that. But I am interested in the fact that I so often want to have the tough and the sensual together. For me, that it just seems so very necessary to not just have one thing. And I don't know what that's about, but that is something that satisfies me. That's what I feel good about the pieces that I've created. What that says about, I've lived happily with a man for 50-some years. So maybe that was getting those 2 things together. But that's not a conscious thought when I am working in my studio. And as Rachel just said, I think sometimes I come off as rather tough. I've sort of heard that remark every once in a while, but I don't feel tough. But that's the mystery of what we present and what we feel.
I'd also like to direct a question to Phylicia, the woman who has the tree tattooed on her body and has placed herself in the ground.
I don't even know that I can articulate like an answer to that, because I would have to say kind of the same thing you just said, is that it doesn't it's not conscious for me, you know, like it's very natural for me, but in the sense that I don't even think about it. Not in my studio practice, not even when I decided to dig a hole and get inside of it. You know what I mean? So I guess it's just something that is innately inside me that comes out in that way, and my connection to trees, I'm not even sure how to articulate that. It's just all something that is subconsciously ingrained in who I am, and it's something that I interact with often to make my work. But I haven't even given that like deep thought, just because it just is something that has always felt like home to me, you know? So I guess that's my response.
Oh, that's good. Would you pass the mic over to Nora? Because I'm going to start by addressing this question to her. Her work speaks very strongly to identity. And the question is, identity, the way in which a woman views herself through her personal prism, the perception placed upon her by another man or woman, and beliefs conceived of religious doctrine are touched upon in the exhibition. In what way does your work speak to a woman's identity, and what message does it convey?
I think all of us have reached on this at some extent. Like, who we are is, you can look at religiously, gender, sexuality, race, social economic class. These are all different things that can make up who we are and how we define ourselves. And the ones that become the most central to who we are the ones that are most boldly reflected back at us. And I think that's essential when we're talking, like someone said, I see myself as a woman, I don't see myself as a woman. Introduce yourself by a race or not by a race, because it's like, what is reflected back at us? And so it's easy as a white person to not see yourself as white, because everybody knows white, so you don't have to think about it. And I think for the pieces that I made in the show, I was in a very Christian context, and that this sort of idea of what a female in a Christian world or in a biblical context was so paramount and being reflected back at me everywhere I looked that I had to make work about it. But now that I'm out of that context, like, I don't make work about it anymore. And so I think, you know, who we are is definitely, I think, what's being pushed, reflected back at us. And then I think that probably remains true to most of the art that we see in this room.
Would anyone else like to respond to the question? All right. Then I'll go on to the last. How has a relationship with a woman or the feminine force shaped or influenced your artwork? David, you're smiling, so we'll pick on you first.
I feel like one of the token males in the show.
Yeah, don't worry, it's coming down to this end of the table too.
You know, again, that's a question that could take a long time to answer. You know, I learned from my wife, and I see her strong traits, and sometimes she's a good teacher for me, and she can bring out my softness. I practice a form of martial art called Tai Chi, and as you all probably are aware of, there's a yang and a yin. I can tell you my yin is strong. But to really come to terms with what that is inside of me, it's taken over 20 years of study and a lot of surrender. And to understand what that energy is, it's really interesting. But it doesn't exist just by itself. It can't. It's impossible. It has to have yang, and it's continually always moving. So the yin is how I look at it. Because I really don't make up or dress up like a woman, so I really look good more in this life. It's integral to who I am as a human being. And without it, I'm lost. So I would like to pass it down to some of the others.
Yes. We'll let Michael Gross respond next.
Well, it's interesting you asked, because I've been thinking about, again, why my pieces are here. And I think that the fact that mine relate towards is very important because I think I have inside of me, a lot of people think I'm kind of brash and tough, but inside I don't feel I am. And I think that the reason that I have wanted, needed to make art, and especially the abstract art, is that this is the sensitive side of me, and then I'm managing to control that and let it be there. But at the same time, the part of me that wants to control things is working very, very hard to make it perfect or balanced as opposed to just being there all out. So I feel that I have a lot of feminineness in me. I think that's, my mother was a very emotional person and an artist, and I think that got into me.
One other comment I wanted to make about hanging the two of your works together is because I also saw in it that the flow of the hair and the position of the body, those movements were mimicked in your abstract pieces. You look very carefully. So in the curatorial lens, and I examined the works very carefully, and I saw those things. Like in the black piece, if you look, you will see that the braids of the woman's hair, the way in which her hair flows, you'll see that same pattern and flow in your abstract piece. So does anyone else want to address the question?
I'll just talk about my own pieces. I have two teenage daughters, and so they both served as sort of a taste committee. They had to sort of approve. I didn't want to take show fire anything I couldn't show to them, and so forth. And but then they also I sort of kept in mind how this would reflect on them, looking at these images, how would they reflect themselves in that. And that was in my mind as that it was.
They're very respectfully done. Anyone else? Rachel?
I guess I'm thinking about one of my brothers who also loves building things. But he always builds practical things. So I'm not just that, what he does with his desire to make things is, I'm going to say, more masculine. It's a drawer, it's a table, it's things he can use. And one day he turned to me and he said, Rachel, why don't you ever make something useful? And so I'm going to say that, artwork often tends towards, that's not going to be a right thing to say. I was going to say it tends towards the feminine, and then I think about these masculine artwork. So that the artwork you have chosen, stick to that. It's tapping into the feminine side of the creative process that is done, and we can go either which way.
And also the reason that men and women are in the show, and there are many, but I'll give you the short list, is because we, as human beings, possess the female and male energy and spirit. And so that, being the female force, is what we wanted to focus on, is expressed by both men and women. I had someone come here and said, oh, I didn't realize that men were in the show also. I said, yes, because men are able to express, relate to the feminine force as well. It's what, we need with both forces to, conceive and to bring the child into the world, but it's the feminine energy and nature and force that we're looking for. So I want to open the floor now to questions. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question for Edwin. Your models look like they're on some type of plexiglass. You see the imprint on the knees, the legs, and the face. And what are they on? And also then, how did you take their photograph?
So they're on a large
And the wind, the blowing, how did that happen? If there's a barrier like plexiglass between the camera and the model.
So they're actually above me. We actually created a large glass stage that I built out of scaffolding, and so they're up above me. I'm just photographing them from below.
Okay.
So they're both naked and unsupported. They're completely out there in this sort of way of sort of being floated in space. And that was it. And that was done very specifically to knowing that I was going to sandwich them between in plexi to create a sort of a trunk boy effect to sort of create a question of whether is this person a photograph of a person or a person within a frame. Is sort of, are we creating we framed a human being inside this? And I played a long time with the frames and how we're going to present them. So at one point I was going to do into large boxes that could sort of stand out from the wall and be a little more very more solid box-like. It ended up with this more thin slide, specimen case type thing. As I went through the process, but it was a large construction to put this all together. And it's something that I'm at the point of my career where I have the technical skills to be able to express the ideas. It's always a challenge for everybody. It's great ideas, but you haven't yet developed the language yet, or the technical language. And now I can figure out how to do these things and have staff and resources to actually take an idea and actually execute it the right way. It's very exciting.
One question that I've been asked several times is, did you wet the surface? They wanted to know if there was water on the place.
There was no water on there. In fact, it was a cut and struggle. The glass got filthy when anybody touched it. It was just the oils of your skin and so forth. So, we had like one shot, 2 shots that we had to clean the glass kit. Lisa, who's down at the end with the dreadlocks, she couldn't breathe until I finished taking up her hair and took a picture because she would have fogged the glass. The glass would have fogged. So that's why her hair was perfect. So I really had to rush to get it all in place and so that she could breathe again.
I have one question, but I also want to make one statement. I want to say to Sondra that I like the idea that you don't think of yourself as a woman, but why don't you? Because that's the first thing I think of. Mother, daughter, sister, auntie, and all of that. And I found that very interesting that you said you don't think of yourself as a woman. And to, I can't remember, Rachel, I immediately was drawn to your work. And when you talked about when you grew up in a large family, you had to fix things, I grew up that way. And so as you talked, I looked at this piece and I remember my mother saying, you can't afford to repeat the purchase, so buy well the first time, and then you had to make sure you repaired it. So like me trying to make a hymn that never was right. And this piece, to me, embodied a woman's body, but also that washboard we had to use to make sure we really got the stain out.
All right, I'll make it short. Why I don't think of myself as a woman. I really don't. I look in the mirror and I am constantly surprised. And I don't think it's part of the context, I guess. I had 4 older brothers growing up. But by the time I was 14, it was just my mother and I. And I just never ever thought that there was a division of labor. I never thought there was a division of something that a man could do that I couldn't do. And I also never really thought that there was a difference in how I cared for myself, groomed myself, adorned myself. And I will be very honest, since I've already laid this out in this room, it wasn't until I was 40 years old that I shaved the hair off my body and put jewelry on and changed some of the ways that I had just plowed through life up to that point. My family calls it, my great revelation of turning 40 when I said I became a woman. So I don't know why I was such a late bloomer to my femininity, but I don't know that I ever separated the things that were me from the things that were the feminine or the masculine part of who I am.
Rachel, do you want to make
I love your work too.
I don't think there's a question. I'm just thinking about when I was out in Banff after I graduated. They had a wonderful summer program, and I was working on this piece, and it was two circular pieces of wood with two handles, and I had a ball bearing, and it's kind of I put it not in the middle, but on the edge, so it kind of turned in this funny way, and I was thinking about it as a couple, and both sides were exactly the same. And at the same time, there was another woman making a sculpture, and she had this like tall woman and this short man, and I'm looking like, men and women so different, and I don't get it. And I got married, and my husband has a lot of the feminine in him, and I have a lot of the masculine in me, and I'm definitely the woman and he's the man, and I learned about differences in my marriage, that men and women, that there really are differences, that I just went like kind of over my head. Maybe because I wasn't a girly girl, and nobody in my family was like a macho man, and so I didn't really get it.
I just wanted to make another comment about your work. Part of what I saw in it also was that it mimicked the torso of a woman's body, and I think I made that comment when I came to see you. And there's kind of a play off of things here that Jessica and I got really excited about because we just thought we're so smart. So with Nora's piece, we gave her a head. And then with Rachel's piece, if you look at Phylicia's blouse, you will see that the patterns in her blouse are mimicked in the pattern in Rachel's piece. And then again, this was a torso for another torso. If these two didn't want a torso up, that she could find another torso here. So we really thought this process through, and really wanted there to be this dialogue that's going on with the work. And I was a little concerned with Edwin because when he dropped the pieces off, he made the comment about, where are you going to hang them, I think you asked, and will it be hung together? And I said, well, I don't know if I responded because we were busy talking about some of the other things, but I remember emailing you later to say, so that you wouldn't be too concerned, that normally when I do a group exhibition, really what I try to do as a curator is to demonstrate why the works are here together, how they relate to one another. And so I rarely hang one artist's work over here and group all of their pieces there. I mean, because although Sondra's works are all together, they really are talking to the earth, the water, the tree, and all of these things. So, as I said, we had this dialogue and set up this conversation in the way that we did because we recontextualized a lot of the artist's work. We saw in it perhaps what you hadn't considered, and also perhaps what you had. But the works just speak and work so beautifully. I mean, this is one I wish I could take this one on the road because it really is so profound. The works are so incredibly beautiful. And also this stems from an experience that I had in taking you off in another direction for just a moment. In 2003, my youngest son and I had an experience to work on a project in Niger to research and document the utilitarian and ceremonial art objects made by women from the 8 nomadic groups there. And part of our stay was with the Tuareg people. And we stayed out in the desert. In the desert, we slept on the ground with either nomadic, so they do their makeshift tents. And we stayed at one compound. And the beauty of that experience will stay with me forever. And what was one of the things that stood out to me most strongly was how close they lived to the earth. And I asked, okay, you're out here, you don't have GPS, you don't have anything to direct you. How do you know where to move to? When to go to? You're nomadic, so when do you know when you should be migrating or moving on to the next place for water and, to sustain yourself. And he said, well, the animals direct us because they're so in tune to the earth. So they know where to go. They're led by their animals. And I thought, oh wow, would I be really lost if we hadn't had this conversation? And even about how, they water and all of those things. I won't go into that any further. But that experience keeps coming back to me. And this was a way in which I could reconnect to that experience and knowing how essential Earth is, how important the feminine force and masculine force, when we chose to just focus on the feminine, is in the way in which we live. And we think about it, it's either subconsciously or consciously. For me, it's become very conscious in terms of the way I think about it and live my life. I hate wasting water now because it was such a precious resource out there. And just one last story. One morning we're brushing our teeth. We're traveling with bottled water. And rinsing our mouths. They see us spitting out clean water. And one woman nearly passed out. She went like she could not believe how wasteful we were. So we're like, there's no such thing as privacy, so everything you do, you're doing in public. And so, it's like, oh my God, how do we not brush our teeth and use water? And so I say this because nature is so important. We need to be better stewards of Mother Earth. And this is also what's kind of an underlying theme here. And, everyone has done such a beautiful job. So I don't want to take up any more time. I want to stop here. I don't know what time it is, but I do want to make time for us to take a little bit of a break. We have more food that needs to come out in terms of some fresh melons and such. And I want us to go in the back and just take a little bit of time to view Phylicia's video. And I think that she's going to do a reading for us while the video is playing. I'm leaving that for her to decide. But we have a little, it's really special. So let's break here. Thank you all again for coming. We really appreciate your being here. And artists, this would not be possible without you. And Phylicia, thank you for, I know you're going to do this thing. Jessica, thank you again for all of your help in making this exhibition so successful. And to Jamea and Allie, this happens because of your efforts too. Thank you.